Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today I am doing a May wrap-up of all the books that I read in the month of May. So only 2 of them were physical copies and then the rest were on my Kindle. And I read 10 books this month. So we will just start with the physical books. So the first one that I read was The Fear by Natasha Preston. And I rated this one a 2 stars. And that is all because of the ending. I have read her other books shown on the back. I've read The Twin and The Lake. And every single one of her books, it's very good. Like, it is, they're not like scary, but they are very much thrillers. And they're really good. The writing's good and everything. But her endings, I personally don't like her endings at all. The endings are just never like wrapped up, and it's always like a huge cliffhanger. Like, it just ends in the middle of the story. And then I find that she doesn't make like sequels to the books afterwards. So you're literally just left with like that dead end after the book. So for that reason, I did rate this book a 2 out of 5 stars. It was super good. I guess I'll just give you like a little synopsis so I don't spoil it. But there's a meme going around asking people like if they were to be like murdered, what like their biggest fear would be of being murdered. And there's a girl named Izzy, and she pretty much like, people start dying and she's like, oh, like they're dying the way that they posted that they were afraid to die. And so she starts like digging around and trying to like figure it out because the police aren't really doing anything. And she finds out that people she like thought were her friends were actually really sketchy. So and like I said, it was really good, but it ended very abruptly, and that's probably just how the story is going to end. So I did give it a 2 out of 5 stars, but the story itself was really good. It only took me about like 2 hours to read this, and I got through it within a day. It was really good, but the endings just always ruin it for me personally. She's a really good author. I just wish, like I said, she would wrap up her stories more and actually give us the endings that her stories deserve. The last book that I read physically is called The Honeymooners by Christina Lauren. And this book I rated a 3.5 out of 5 stars. And I rated it that just because it was kind of immature in my opinion. To me, it felt like it was very much like a young adult rom-com. But it was good. I also read this book in a day. It took me about like 2 or 3 hours. I'd say probably about 3 hours to read this. But basically, there's these 2 twins, and the one twin is getting married, and it's like everybody at the wedding, they eat the food and they get, I do believe it's shellfish, but they all got food poisoning except for the 2 of them that didn't eat the food, which was the other twin sister Olive, and then the groom's brother Ethan as well. So they had a non-refundable honeymoon trip to Maui. So the brother gave, like the groom gave the trip to his brother, the bride gave the trip to the sister. So they both had to go and pretty much pretend to be like a married couple. And along the way, as you can assume, they kind of decided that they liked each other a little bit more than they thought they did. So, but yeah, they like didn't get along at all in the beginning. I forgot to mention that. But Ethan and Olive were like enemies. So it's like an enemies to lover trope. But yeah, it was definitely like a rom-com, like young adult. So I wasn't a huge fan of it, but the writing was good. And like I said, I got through it pretty quickly, but it just wasn't my favorite. So I rated it a 3 out of 5 stars. And the next 8 books were read on my Kindle through Kindle Unlimited. The first book that I read was Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover. And I rated that book a 4 out of 5 stars. It was really good. It was basically 2 people were in love, and they ended up getting into an accident, and they were both under the influence, but they still got in the car to drive. The girl ended up crashing the car. She thought that the boyfriend was dead and ended up leaving the scene. Turns out he was not dead, so the family like pressed charges on her, and she ended up going to jail for 5 years because he was still alive, but then he died, I think, on the side of the road or something. But she goes back to the town after she gets out of jail for, I do believe, 5 years because she ended up having a daughter. She pled guilty when the charges were pressed because she wasn't aware that she was pregnant at the time. So she goes back and she's trying to like reunite with her 4-year-old daughter, and she runs into the deceased boyfriend's best friend Ledger, and basically they kind of like fall in love, and he helps her get her daughter back. It's a really beautiful story. I really like it. But yeah, again, I rated it 4 out of 5 stars. And the next book that I read was called Heartbones, again by Colleen Hoover, and I rated that one a 4-star. I just like loved that story. I really did. Basically, there is this girl named Bea, and her mom has problems with addiction. She basically comes home from work one day and finds the mom has passed away from an overdose on the couch, and she has nowhere else to go but the dad's house. And the dad lives, I do believe it was in Texas, and he's like remarried and has a stepdaughter of his own, and it's summertime, so she goes, and it's pretty much her trying to like figure out her new life and everything. She meets a boy named Samson. There's like a little bit of a love story between them, and like a bunch of things happen in between, but it's such like a pretty like summer vibe story, if that makes sense. Like when I was reading it, I was just getting summer vibes like the whole way through. It was such a good book. But yeah, if you're looking for like a feel-good like summer story, I definitely recommend Heartbones. And the next book that I read was called To Love Jason Thorne by Ella Mays, and I rated that 4 out of 5 star. And that book was really good. Basically, it's like a brother's best friend love trope, and the older brother has a friend named Jason Thorne. And this little girl had like a crush on him like her whole childhood, and he ended up having to move away. I do believe that the mom passed away and that was why, but he ended up having to move away. So the story takes place like years later, and she became an author, and the book that she wrote is actually being turned into a movie, and he became a famous actor, so he is actually going to act in the movie that's being made from her book. And it's kind of just like their love story and like what happens, and it was really good. I gave it, like I said, I gave it a 4 out of 5 star. I thought it was really good. But then we move on to the next book that I read, and so it's To Love Jason Thorne and then To Hate Adam Connor, so it's called like the Love-Hate series, or the Love-Hate duet. And basically To Hate Adam Connor takes place in her best friend Lucy's point of view, and I just love the story. It was so cute. But basically Lucy has to move in with Jason and Olive from the first book, and because she had like her current boyfriend like moved away, kind of just left her, didn't ask her to like come with or anything after college, and she's kind of like spying on the guy next door because she thought like he was attractive and whatever. So she puts like a ladder between their gate, and she's like spying on them, and one day something happens while she's watching, and she actually jumps over the wall to go like help out in the situation, and he catches her and actually has her sent to jail for the night, because he like completely misunderstood the whole situation. He didn't even want to listen to anything she had to say. And after that, he actually does ask her to come and work for him. And the book, the book is kind of another like enemies to lover type trope. So yeah, I rated that a 5 out of 5. It's a super cute story. The actor actually has a little boy. I can't remember his name. So she gets to be like a stepmom, and she loves kids. So it's a really cute story. And the next book that I read is called 6 Months Later by Natalie Richards. And this book was interesting. It was kind of messed up. It almost reminds me of season 4 of Stranger Things. And this story was about a girl, and she basically was in study hall. She was super tired, so she went to take a nap just like during her study period. And when she woke up, she was like in the same room, but everything had changed, and it was like winter. When she fell asleep, it was May. She realizes she woke up 6 months later. There's people who are friends with her and all of a sudden talking to her that she was never friends with before, because she didn't have a lot of friends. It was just her and her best friend, and all of a sudden she has all these friends, and she has this boyfriend. She can't figure out why she's not remembering like what the heck happened. Like, why is it 6 months like later when I woke up? Like, what's going on? And come to find out, there's actually another girl that this happened to, and everybody thought she was crazy. So the parents ended up moving her out of town, and she goes on like a trip to try to figure out like what happened. She like doesn't really figure it out on the trip, but when she gets back, she does end up finding out like what happened, why she's not remembering. And it's just like, I don't want to give anything away. If you've seen the end of Stranger Things season 4 and you read this book, you'll definitely like connect the two. That's definitely what it reminded me of. But it's like a huge plot twist at the end. Like, you find out why these people are forgetting, like, what's going on, and why all of a sudden, like, there's these people in their lives that weren't there before, and, like, how all of it just, like, connects. You find that out at the end. I don't want to give it away because I don't want to spoil it, but yeah, that book was really good. A 3 out of 5 star, just because the ending was very, like, it didn't leave you at, like, a cliffhanger, but it was very, like, fast. Like, the whole story was very detailed and everything. Like, it went by all at, like, a nice steady pace. And then you get to, like, the last few chapters, and she just, like, wrapped it up like that. And all of a sudden, the book was over. And I'm like, for that reason, I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. And if you're noticing, the way, for me, it's very important the way the authors end books, because if you're gonna have a good story and then give it a crap ending, like, that just brings the rating down for me. Like, the book could be terrible all the way through, and then it could be, like, super great at the end, and, like, I could give you a 4-star rating, like, you know. Obviously, my opinion doesn't really matter. Like, everybody has their own opinions. But that's just my personal rating. The last 2 books that I read for the month were actually a duology, and it was The Confidence of Wildflowers and The Resurrection of Wildflowers. So I don't want to, like, give away too much of the story, because you definitely just have to read it. Just so you guys know, there is a trigger warning at the beginning of both books. There are a few trigger warnings, and then it also is a 13-year age gap. And I rated these both a 4 out of 5 star, which surprised me, because I really thought I wasn't going to like the books because of the age gap. For me personally, I'm not a fan of age gaps at all. 2 years older than me is old enough. Like, you guys do you, but I just don't vibe with the whole age gap thing. That's just, like, a huge ick for me. I'm surprised that I gave both of these books a 4-star rating. But basically, the first book, like, sets up the story, and something, like, sad. Okay, this is another thing. I feel like a terrible human being. But at the end, everybody said, like, at the end of the first book, like, you're gonna cry, like, it's so sad and whatever. And I personally didn't cry. I mean, I thought it was sad, obviously, because I'm not heartless, but I didn't cry. I just personally couldn't relate. Something, like, tragic happens at the end. It's really sad. And the second book kind of, like, picks it back up. And the beginning of, it's actually, so it's kind of cool because it picks, like, right back up. The second book picks right back up at the end of, like, the first book. And it's kind of like, it starts out, like, slow and sad, and then it just, like, picks up and takes off from there completely. So I did really like how the layout of the books went. But yeah, so I would say the first book, like I said, pretty much sets up the whole storyline. You, like, know the characters and everything, and you kind of get used to, like, the little love story they have going, and then something tragic happens at the end. And the second book, the reason why the second book is called The Resurrection of Wildflowers is because it picks it back up from the first book of everything that happened. And both of those books, by the way, are by Michaela Smeltzer. And if she wrote more books, I think I would definitely try to read them. Like I said, I'm not a huge fan of the age gaps whatsoever. But it actually wasn't too bad, and there wasn't, like, a lot of, like, smut or anything in it. So it wasn't, like, terrible. And, like, I could just skip over any of those scenes and get back to, like, the story. It wasn't like the whole story was based around, like, their romance. So I did really enjoy those. But like I said, a lot of people said that, like, after the first book, you're gonna cry. But for me personally, I couldn't really relate to the situation. It was really sad. I just didn't cry. I feel bad, but I didn't. But that is it for today's video. If you guys liked it, give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to click that subscribe button, and I will see you guys in my next video.